everyone. I have the pleasure of having Brian White here with me, who is the head of pricing analytics at Dell Technologies. Thank you for making time.
Oh yeah, of course, no problem.
And before we get started, I know Dell is a very known company, but if you could just give a brief overview, particularly of the size of the organization and ultimately what you guys do.
Sure. So our organization specifically, if you think about Dell's pricing function as a whole, we're really divided into three parts. The first is a technology and controls organization, of which I'm part. The second part is what we call our centers of competence, which have responsibility for list price setting as well as discount guidance development. And then the third part of Dell's function is the pricing function is the deal desk.
Okay.
So those three functions together probably represent, I would guess, several hundred people for our entire business.
Okay. We'll talk about that
Okay.
in a little bit. How did you find your way into pricing? What's kind of the background and what happened to get you into the pricing function?
Sure. So I initially came to Dell in the corporate strategy function
Hmm.
and just happened to sit next to the pricing team and learned a little bit about what they did. The analytics was a big part of the function. Got really interested in the team's role and the impact they drove, and a role opened up on the team, and that's how I found my way in.
Fascinating. What are some of the key challenges that your team is dealing with when it comes to pricing?
Yeah, so I think some of the challenges that we face are around the configurability of our
Mhm.
portfolio, right? So one solution is not like the next. So there's a lot of complexity that goes into pricing those solutions, managing the discount of those solutions. Another thing is our product portfolio is very diverse,
Yeah.
which creates a lot of challenges for our sales team, just in terms of not only knowing those products, but understanding how to price them. The profitability expectations of product A is quite different than product B. So yeah, a lot of complexity in the process of
Mhm.
doing.
You already alluded to that the sales team prices products as well. They're very often negotiated.
Yes, yeah, I would say most of our prices are negotiated. I think we have a pretty typical model in that we set a pricing range that's specific to the transaction that our sellers can negotiate within, and then if they need to negotiate outside of that range, that's when it goes
That
the
makes
the
sense.
deal desk. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any pricing achievements that you're particularly proud of, like things that you kickstarted in the organization? And typically, the bigger ones are the ones that are also more painful.
Uh-huh.
Does anything come to mind?
So I think the main one that's several years old is implementing our deal and pricing recommendation engine,
Uh-huh.
which was very successful, and just the rollout of that tool, getting
Yeah.
100% of the business on board was a big achievement.
Wow.
Most recently, I think what we've been working on is automating some of our deal desk function, and really trying to bucket our deal desk deals into three categories. Those that we can definitely support. We don't need to require a ton of thought to approve those. Those at the other end of the spectrum, and then really letting uh, the pricers focus on everything in the middle, right, where we need a lot of consideration as to whether or not we want to move forward and at what.
That's always a big change management effort, I assume as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Maybe on the other side, have there been any pricing bloopers or any, let's call them, bigger learnings, where you kind of hope for a result, but actually, you have a learning on the way, and pricing always catches you a little bit by surprise. Did that happen as well?
Well, I think like most industries, recently, we've faced a lot of inflationary pressure.
Right.
And so just trying to manage our way through that and, kind of keep up with the pace of inflation and thinking through, where we can increase prices and, where we may not be able to. I don't know that we've had any big missteps yet, but it's certainly, been a challenging exercise.
Mhm. Let's maybe stay at inflation, so big hot button topic. Are there any beyond price increases? Are there any activities or steps that the pricing team has initiated in order to, for example, support the sales team or thinking about different product offerings to combat inflation and reacting a different way?
Yeah, so I think one thing that we had to do at the start of the pandemic and as the supply chain tightened up is, really think through substitutes, right? So some of the products that our customers would have naturally purchased, maybe weren't available or we couldn't get supply of. So trying to use, price and also, educating our sellers around what they could substitute for product that maybe wasn't available, making sure that, the prices of products that were more supply constrained, reflected that market reality.
Okay.
Yeah.
So also a lot to do, I suppose,
Yes.
despite the large sales force, the large workforce in pricing. Let's maybe talk about the pricing organization. You already mentioned you have quite a large team, not necessarily for the size of the business, but in terms of just number of people overall. More than 100 folks focusing on pricing. It's probably particularly interesting for those companies that are in the billion or multi-billion-dollar range and they don't have anyone and pricing, the question will come up, what do they do and how is pricing actually structured and organized? Where does it sit? Who do they report to? How do you make that actually work? And yeah, a big part of your overall strategy.
Sure. So, the to answer like the first part of your question, or actually the second part of your question, where do they report? We kind of have, I guess you would almost consider it a little bit of a federated model in that our team, which is the central controls team, sits as well as the deal desk sits within the finance function.
Hmm.
And then all the rest of the organization is organized basically on a combination of geography and product lens. And all of those teams sit within the product groups
Hmm.
and the geographies, but mostly they align to the product groups themselves. So they have responsibility for from everything to setting list prices as well as the discount guidance, and then also with our help, gathering market data to understand, does our price position compare to that of our competitors, and where are the offerings similar and where are they different.
So it sounds a bit like central guidance and local execution. Is that fair?
It varies from team to team,
Okay.
yes. So for some products, they kind of have a central approach to pricing, and then they leave it to regional teams to tailor the guidance, if you will, to the regional specific situation. Other teams are completely, almost like semi-autonomous in terms of they set the pricing
Yeah.
approach for that particular region or
Because
the company.
that's always the question, not just who should pricing report to, but how centralized versus decentralized should it be, right? So central means more control, but loss of information, and decentral ultimately means that different teams or different regions might end up doing very different things, which is a challenge if you have global key accounts.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a challenge we face, right? Like
Mm.
making sure that where we do have global accounts who maybe buy from us in
Uh-huh.
multiple regions, that they're getting similar pricing and having a similar experience
Mhm.
across.
Yes, so many folks will wonder, how can I actually build a pricing organization? Maybe not to 100 people, but hire 5 or 6 folks that dedicate their time entirely to pricing. Do you have any advice or guidance? How did Dell actually create this momentum and that buy-in from leadership to invest in the pricing function overall to such a degree?
Yeah, I would say the pricing function in its current state, we do depend on a lot of automation. That was a big change for us,
Hmm.
right? So before our current state, it was a very manual process. And, we talked about how 90 some odd percent of pricers, depend on Excel heavily. We were probably in that camp at one point in time. How we got to where we were was, or we are now, is just taking a very pragmatic approach. We started, piloting like in a very simplistic way, like, what the impact of technology could look like. And if we took a more disciplined approach, what sort of returns could we expect? And started small and gradually expanded. So as we were able to show the value of the approach that we took, we got, it was pretty easy to get buy-in from the rest of the organization.
Do you think is that more a data-driven approach or is it more a people-driven
Mhm.
approach?
That's interesting. I think probably a little bit more of a data driven approach
Uh-huh.
in our case, to build the case for change.
maybe from your perspective, where does the future sit? So, where you think is pricing headed in your organization? What are kind of like the next big milestones to think of?
Yeah, so I think for us, definitely we'll continue down the journey of deal desk automation. I think that's a big opportunity for us. And also, even though we've adopted a lot of tools already, I think there probably is an opportunity for things like machine learning and artificial intelligence to play a bigger role, and maybe automate some of the guidance tasks that were today. So I would see that as the next horizon.
Maybe as last question, completely changing topics, but if you could, at the beginning of your pricing career, give your younger self a good advice of things to do or things to look out for in pricing, what would that advice look like? What would that be?
That's a great question. I would say for me in particular, I probably would have started my journey in pricing earlier. If I could have in my career. And then I think the other thing too is, if I were to go back in time, I definitely would have focused on more on statistics in terms of my university studies.
Yeah,
Knowing what I know now, I mean, at the
yeah,
time I was in school, machine learning and artificial intelligence isn't nearly what it is now. But having the benefit of hindsight,
yeah. Yeah, same here. I did that afterwards
yeah,
and was excited about the additional learnings. Very good. Thank you so much for making time.
yeah,
Really appreciate it. It's very insightful.
the conversation.
And thanks for joining.